You've joined me for Seeing the Big Picture with Galileo's Comprehensive Assessment System. My name is Nancy Auslander, and I am a Field Services Coordinator for Assessment Technology Incorporated and Galileo K-12 Online. I saw this yesterday and thought I would share it with you. Why are we looking at comprehensive assessment incomes? It's because teachers don't really teach for the income. They are teaching for the outcome. Lest we forget, this is what we're all about, positive outcomes. But how do we know if we're on track to help our students achieve these positive outcomes? By looking at data, looking at how students are responding and learning. So we can do that with a comprehensive assessment system, which Galileo can provide for you. First, I'll talk about what makes an assessment system comprehensive, what makes a benchmark series comprehensive. I'll show you reports that both teachers and administrators use to learn about students' standard mastery, performance and risk, growth, and then I'll demonstrate just a few of the features and tools Galileo provides to administrators to help integrate your educator evaluation tools with the Galileo data. So let's first look at what makes a system comprehensive. A comprehensive system is going to include standards-aligned assessments that we use for benchmark tests, pre- and post-tests, formative or classroom tests, maybe those unit tests or chapter tests that you may want to administer in your classroom. Final course exams can also be integrated into your testing system and aligned to standards. And then it should include some instructional effectiveness rating scales. The system should include some standards-aligned instructional resources, and in Galileo, we do have these resources available to you, including Khan Academy and Learn Zillion lessons, as well as ATI's pre-built instructional dialogues. The reporting and data analysis should help guide your differentiated instruction and include an analysis, an item response theory psychometric analysis to help determine if students are growing, what level they are performing at on their assessments to see if they're on course or at risk for not passing that state summative. And finally, it should include instructional effectiveness tools, reports, and score compilers for your educator evaluation. All right, let's continue here with the assessment series. What is a comprehensive assessment? Here at ATI, we create what's called a Comprehensive Blueprint Assessment Series, a CBAS. And the comprehensive blueprint means it will be aligned to these, to your state summative. It is created by ATI, of course, from items in our secure benchmark library. We will have benchmark items that you will never see on any classroom tests that you may create for your classrooms. Each test is approximately 45 items per test, which means it should take your students about 45 to 60 minutes to complete, usually about the length of a typical classroom session. There should be up to 5 tests per series that include your pre and post tests and up to 3 interim benchmarks. We actually provide 3 of them that you can schedule as you see fit for your uses. They usually correspond to quarter, end of quarter tests, or maybe if you don't want to test your students that often, you can schedule a mid-year, but you can use them however you like. All the tests in the series, as I have tried to mention before, should be assessing all the standards that will be evaluated on your state summative. That's why we align our benchmarks using the blueprint that the state provides for the state summatives, so that you can track whether or not your students are on course for passing that state benchmark or summative. There are also other assessment options that include our audio tests for early literacy and early math for your first graders and your kindergartners. We also allow access to our formative item bank so that teachers can build their own final course exams, those classroom formative tests and quizzes, and staff can also incorporate and administer any pre-existing tests they may have on hand using our automated scoring key, so they won't have to create a test from scratch. But now let's switch over to the teacher dashboard and look and see how this all works for Galileo. And I am actually going to quickly log in as a district administrator for a demo district. You can see there's a little splash page we have in Galileo that tells you about upcoming enhancements or maybe maintenance dates. But here I've logged in as actually a district user here. You can see my initials up here. Allow me, by clicking on those, I get access to help and tech support. And I've taken myself to Mr. Barrett's 5th grade classroom, where we have some demonstration data for 5th grade math. All the reports that you see here, the widgets, everything you see is going to populate in the same way no matter what grade and subject you are teaching. But the very first thing teachers are going to want to know before they start testing their students is what's going to be, what standards are going to be evaluated on the benchmarks that were built by the folks here at ATI that my students are taking as benchmarks. And we have a couple of reports that you can access. One is the test blueprint report, which actually shows what are the content areas for this 5th grade math test. And it looks like we've got about 31% of the test is going to cover numbers and operations, and the rest of the test is going to cover numbers and operations fractions. My own personal torture device. I don't know that I could pass 5th grade math again. I don't know how I did it the first time. But you can see that we indicate which performance objectives will be evaluated for each content area. These content area weightings, the 31% and the 68%, will be the weightings for all the tests in the benchmark series, including your pre-test and post-test. And because we have only 45 questions on our test, these individual little performance objectives, 1 or 2 may get swapped out until so that we ensure that all the performance objectives that you're going to encounter on that state test are covered in our series. State tests are usually around 100 questions. They can cover everything in one swell foop, but that gives you one snapshot, and we're able to indicate growth for you. There's also the item parameters report, which shows you again each question, the performance objective that it is evaluating, and the factors that we use in calculating that analyzed data that gets you a scaled score, what we call the developmental level score, or DL score, which is the score that looks like what you would see for an SAT score rather than a raw score, or what your state uses as well. They do the same kind of psychometric analysis to get you a scaled score. It's no longer all about whether they got it right or wrong. Now we're looking at other factors as well, so we can track growth and performance. So teachers have access to that, and I'm going to move back to the dashboard, and now we're able to look at the data itself. How did students respond? What are their raw scores telling us about standards mastery? And we have a couple of reports that I can share with you. One is Let's see, where should we start? Let's start with intervention alert. This is going to be the nuts and bolts of how you respond with your differentiated instruction. This will actually help you differentiate your instruction for your students. I didn't mean to click on that test. I meant to click on one of my benchmark tests. You have access for your formative tests to the same raw score data reports that you do for your benchmarks. So let me click on the intervention alert for the correct test, this benchmark 3. And here you can see that the students are across the top and they've got red and white boxes indicating whether or not they've mastered a particular standard based on the number of questions they've answered correctly. This particular district chose to use a scale that shows that to demonstrate mastery, to meet the standard in this case, this is the language this district chose, a student would have to answer at least 60% of the questions for that standard correctly to demonstrate mastery. In this case, there are 5 questions here, and a student would need to answer at least 3 of them correctly. You can see in front of each standard there is a checkbox. I know that I have taught this standard and my students should have mastered it. So I'm going to select that box in order to do something, know what standards I need to help my students with. And I can help them one of 2 ways. I can generate a quiz, a 5-question quiz aligned to that standard, or if I had chosen a standard that had only 2 questions and I thought, you know what, that wasn't really enough in my opinion, my expert teaching opinion, to really demonstrate mastery. So I'm going to generate a 5-question quiz for that standard to see if maybe they didn't have enough opportunity to demonstrate their mastery that I have given them through my fabulous instruction. I can also click on the assignments button, which is where I can access those assignments and lessons from Khan Academy, LearnZillion, and from Galileo's own instructional dialogues to schedule for my students. I'm going to want to concentrate on what I've already taught. This is comprehensive. This is every standard that's going to appear on the state summative, but I know that I've only taught the first 5 or 6 standards, so I'm going to concentrate on that to fill in those gaps. Once I've filled in those gaps, I'm going to know next time that we have another benchmark, I'm going to see, okay, did it stick? It opens up the opportunity for them to perform better because they now have a mastery of that particular item. I can also look ahead to other standards that I have not taught yet and see, ooh, some of these kids already have some, are demonstrating some ability here on this one. Maybe I should pull back on this, find an area of a rectangle standard. I can pull back, maybe pull a day off of that instruction and add it into the adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So I can look at how my instruction is being provided and how my students are responding to it in order to differentiate and fine-tune my instruction and plan my instructional days. So that's how the intervention alert works for standards mastery. We also have another report called detailed analysis, which lets you look at the individual item standards to see how your group of students have responded to individual items. In the interim benchmark assessments, you're going to see the standard, how the students responded. In this case, about 73% of the students responded correctly and about 27 did not. What is it about that question that I may have to help my students with because they answered, so many of them answered incorrectly? Could it be the discriminator B is confusing them? See where the item parameters come in handy? Is it the language that the test is using? There's, for some of your younger students, you may be using less than or takeaway for subtraction problems, and then all of a sudden on a test they see the vocabulary minus or subtract. So now you have a vocabulary lesson, or you may have to look at the instructions to see if maybe that was confusing for your students because it was an item type that you will be able to give your students some practice with, so the next time they encounter it, they're better able to discern what's being asked of them so they can answer correctly and thereby demonstrate their mastery. All right, so that is the detailed analysis, and I'm going to switch back to the dashboard. And now from there, we can look at performance and risk. Now, performance and risk is determined by those DL scores, those scaled scores that our research team has gone in and looked at those factors like difficulty and discriminators and guessing factors and calculated a scaled score that we can use to track performance, risk, and growth. But first, let's talk about performance and risk. Right here, right up front on everybody's dashboard, no matter the grade and subject, you are going to see this graph called the risk level summary. And you can see here, I'll demonstrate, we have 3 tests in our benchmark series that have been analyzed: a first quarter, a second quarter, and a third quarter. Students who passed all 3 of these got a cut score that was at least a passing score, are on course for all 3. If they pass 2 out of 3, they're at low risk. 1 out of 3, moderate risk. And if they didn't pass any of them, they would be at high risk. You can look at the instruction performance tracker for all risk levels, or if you want to look at a particular group of students at a risk level, I'm going to click on the moderate risk level. You can see that by clicking on that bar, it's going to pull up a report that looks similar to the intervention alert, because you have the standards and you can schedule assignments or quizzes for these students to work with. And there were 6 students here. And again, it lists all 3 tests, and you can see the cut scores. In this case, the state used the language, what we here in the state of Arizona used to call the FAME scale: falls far below, approaches, meets, and exceeds the standards, meet and exceeding being passing cuts. So they would have to get 888, 1022, or 1100 in order to pass the test. The state of Arizona has changed that scale to proficiency language: minimally proficient, partially proficient, proficient, and highly proficient. And other states have other languages and may have more or fewer levels of performance. So that's the performance tracker, so you can look at the risk levels, which brings us to another way to look at those risk levels and also those performance levels all in one place. So let's look at View Benchmark Results. And this time you'll see the 3 tests, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, are in a chart side by side, since there are 3 of them. And now you can see exactly what the cut scores were for passing. So 888, the 1022, and the 1100. And for each student, you see how they performed with their DL score. And hovering over each DL score will show you the raw score. And finally, the risk assessment: the on-course, low, moderate, and high risk levels are indicated here. These students here passed all 3. This one passed 2. This one passed 1. And these students here at high risk did not pass any of the tests. So now that we've been through that, we can look at how, that's how a teacher would look at it. Now, how would you look at this for a school or your district? We have a couple of reports in our test sets called the Aggregate Multitest. And I have run this already. I didn't want to have you sit and wait for this to load up. So we can run this in one of two ways. One showing the risk levels. So you can see at all the fifth grade classes at Yerington Elementary, we have the average scores for your students and how many were at high risk, moderate risk, low risk, and on course. And we can also run that report using the performance levels to see how many students fell far below, are approaching, how many meet, how many exceed, and the progression of students in and out of those performance level categories has gone on through the testing series. We started out here with 45 students passing because they meet or exceed, and we ended up with 48. So 3 more have moved up. There is also the student multi-test. If you want to look at the individual students and have data to share with their parents at the parent-teacher conference, there is a similar report you can run. Again, you see how each student performed on their test. I prefer to show this with the performance levels so that parents don't get that risk level vocabulary in their heads, because I think it's kind of a negative thing, or it can be interpreted as negative, but you can see how students progress and perform through the series. Here's my rock star, Alex. And you can see he is growing throughout the series, and he's exceeding the expectations of the standards, as are some of my others. Now, I've even had a question already submitted about growth, and we do have a growth report that you can access both at the classroom level, the school level, and the district level. And I will, just for demonstration purposes, show you how it works at the classroom level, and then we can look at some other ways to look at this as well. So here's the student growth and achievement. And this is showing you both achievement, whether or not they passed this last test in the series, that third quarter assessment, and also the growth between, in this case, I chose the first quarter assessment and the third quarter assessment. So October to March. Looking at this particular report, you can see that the proficiency cut score was 1100, and that's indicated by this green line here going across. The vertical red dashed line shows the expected growth. For fifth grade math, the expected growth was 212 points. Every grade, every subject has a different expected growth for any given time period. What Galileo calculates as part of our analysis is a daily growth constant. This growth constant, you take and multiply it by the number of days, number of calendar days between your two tests. So if there were 90 days and the growth constant was 0.08, you would multiply that by 90 days, and that would come up with the growth constant, or the expected growth for that time frame. So here we expected the students to grow 212 points. There's your vertical line. Everybody's goal here, remember, we're looking for positive outcomes. This quadrant is your positive outcome. You want as many students in the high growth, high achievement quadrant. But for some students, you may just want to see that they're learning and growing You're going to know exactly who is really struggling, low growth, low achievement. They're going to be down here in this corner. Each student is a blue dot, and you can hover on the student to see who they are, what their growth score, or what their expected growth actually ended up being, or their actual growth. There's the terminology I needed, and what their final score was. If you want to see the names of the students in that particular quadrant, your low growth, low achievement, you can click on the number next to the little icons there, the two X's, and you see the list of the students. And from here, you can actually create an intervention group. They could be students who work well together, have similar needs, learning styles, working on, need help with a similar grouping of standards, and you can create an intervention group right here. By the same token, you can switch to your high growth, high achievement group and keep these students engaged. Don't want your rock stars to become bored in your class. You want to keep them engaged and learning and growing. The nice thing about Galileo is for teachers, you have access to our formative banks and assignments, the Khan Academy, LearnZillion, and our instructional dialogues at all grade levels. So you can reach up and help these students and keep them engaged by giving them some more challenging material. And again, you can look at them just by clicking on the number here or switching between the groups in your lists of students. Which brings me to this particular notation here. Expected growth maintained. This is for the teacher. The teacher's performance. Which brings us to another dashboard and how we can use that data, that student growth data, can be included in a categorical growth summary. I only have 5th grade math data in here, so we're only looking at the 5 math teachers and their performance here. I can click on the number and see what the ratings were for which teachers, and I can look at their individual growth of their students. And that's pretty cool. And if I go back to that dashboard, you can see I'm on the admin dashboard. This is what we used to call our school performance. You would see all the grades, all the subjects that you're using in teaching. In addition, we can move to the instructional effectiveness dashboard, which is where you take this student growth, categorical growth, and any other elements you're using in your educator evaluation programs, such as parent surveys, student surveys, classroom observations. You can integrate those tools that you've been using into Galileo. We will take it and create a score compiler to take all of that data from all those elements and use it to create a score compiler so you can give a score to your teacher that kind of looks like this. Mr. Barrett's doing a pretty darn good job with his class. All right, I think that pretty much covers everything we have going on the dashboard, a brief overview of what we do. And now we can move on to questions and answers. All right, I see some questions here. A couple of good ones. When do teachers see results? As I said earlier, raw results are populated just as soon as the very first student answers the very first question. As they run through the test and populate their answers, you're going to see it on your test monitoring report. I'll show you what that looks like, or where you will find that on your teaching dashboard, your teacher dashboard. You will find it under each test. There is a test monitoring report, and you will see those answers populate, and that in turn will populate your intervention alert and detailed analysis. For your analyzed scores in the state of Arizona, those will start to populate in your benchmark results, risk reports, and your growth reports as soon as the first student completes a test. Those will start dropping in. I would not look at many of those scores and reports until all students are done. And for teachers and administrators in other states, we have additional analysis we have to do that may take 5 to 7 business days for those to complete, although just to give my research team a shout out, they usually get it done much more quickly than 5 to 7 days. All right, another good question is, how do administrators run the data school-wide or district-wide? Remember that aggregate multitest that we looked at? I can show you how to run that. We have actually a selection on the page to run it for a school, and then you can select your schools. If you want to run it for the whole district, just select all schools, or select the individual schools that you want to include. If you are a site administrator, like a team leader or a principal who has school-level access, you can click the class button and then select the individual home rooms or all the rooms that you would like to run this on. And that's how you aggregate data. And I can see we've kind of run out of time here. And I do appreciate the time you've taken with me today. And I hope that you do have a better understanding of Galileo's comprehensive assessment system. And if you're interested in scheduling a slower, more personalized demonstration for you and your staff, here's how to contact me or one of ATI's other friendly field services coordinator. You can call our toll-free number, 877-442-5453. You can email us at galileoinfo@ati-online.com, or you can send a request directly from our website by clicking on the link in the top right corner of our homepage. And you can always follow us on Facebook. I hope you'll join us again for our upcoming webinars. For a schedule of events and a list of recordings, please visit our events page at www.ati-online.com. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you.